Welcome to Don't Quote Me on That. One day we will have an intro, but today is not that day.
Hello. I'm Kalina, and welcome back to Don't Quote Me on That, where we kind of talk about movies. Today I'm by myself, and I know we were MIA the last couple weeks. So I'm sorry to break it to you this way, but clearly I love you all more than Eleanor does, because notoriously she's not here. And again, applications for a new co-host will be going live at some point in time, I swear. But all that said and done, as always, a cliche at this point, I will keep it short and sweet for this episode, because it's me by my lonesome. This week, as you know from the title already, I assume, I watched, actually, hopefully you know from the title, because I don't actually know what I watched. Like, I know what happened, but don't ask me the name of it. I watched the J-Lo movie, but like not the one that's about her and Ben Affleck, because I'm pretty sure there's one about her and Ben Affleck, but the other one that, and this is actually one of my criticisms or main comments on the movie, is this movie was essentially a long music video that no one asked for. Because let me not get into my thoughts too early on it here, okay? Basically, watch the movie. I just pulled it up. It's called This Is Me ... Now, which I will assume is also the name of her album. I hope it is, or maybe the name of the album is just This Is Me. I don't know. I went into this blind. I watched half of this at the gym while I was warming up, so forgive me. I think going into it blind was best. The only thing I knew about this movie going in was a very short, and I hate that I'm saying this, but TikTok review in which the person said it was bad, but looked like a funny bad. And I think if I knew any more, if I had done any research, I probably wouldn't have watched it at all. So I'm just going to start at the top. I took notes chronological. I'm sure I will touch on all of my grief with this. I use the word movie very lightly, but all of my grief with this movie. So the first issue I have is, the first thing I saw on the screen is New Yorican Productions. And like, we're going to get into my thoughts, right? Celebrities. When you're a celebrity like J-Lo, who has like a very like decades long career, and I will say, at least at first, rightfully earned said standing. And unfortunately, I can't think of another example. It's like J-Lo and, I don't know, maybe like, not that I'm saying they're on the same level, but like Justin Timberlake, you know, like have a Cadillac. Usher. There we go. Great example. Usher performed at the Super Bowl. It's like J-Lo and Usher. You've got this decades long career. There's like, even if people don't realize it's like a you song, it's a you song. God. Even if people don't realize it's your music, it's your music. Rihanna even. I remember Pentatonics one time did like an evolution of Rihanna, and I was like, I knew all these songs, and like logically I knew they were Rihanna, but I didn't know she had so many bangers. Or Usher, okay? So many people were saying at the Super Bowl, they're like, I didn't realize that was Usher. I didn't realize that was Usher. I didn't realize that was Usher. And like, it's banger after banger after banger. Now, do I think J-Lo puts out banger after banger after banger? No. But I do think that her catalog is so large that like, statistically, she's got a good number of bangers, right? And so I feel like when you reach that level of fame, you don't need to be doing things like making a long music video on Amazon Prime for your album. That's like, at the end of the day, a cash grab. Like, who asked for this? And no one in their right mind, if you weren't J-Lo, would agree to produce or direct or film this even, let alone put it out on their service, right? But because they're like, this is J-Lo, people will watch it, even if it's like me and it's a hate watch, we will get bans on bans on bans. But like, at what point do you have enough money and like status that you can just relax? Because I feel like she can relax, you know? That's just me personally though. I am a hater by nature. To comment more on like the actual content of this, I'll give you like a brief rundown of the plot, even though the plot doesn't really exist and doesn't make any sense. J-Lo tells us this story Two people fall in love. One gets turned into a hummingbird. One gets turned into a flower. Hummingbird's looking for the flower forever. Okay. We go to this factory. This heart is falling apart. J-Lo is going to risk her life to put an emergency flower petal in the heart. Okay. Turns out J-Lo's been talking to her therapist. That's what the scene we are watching is. Then we see her in this glass apartment building. She's in this abusive relationship. She sings a song about being in the abusive relationship and finally deciding to leave, I guess. Then we meet the Zodiacal Council. I did not make that name up. I did not misspeak. That is what they are called. It's a bunch of random celebrities, which I will go into detail about later. And they're all like, oh, well, she tried to date a Libra, I think. Clearly that didn't work out. This is the abusive boyfriend. We gotta find her someone else in the zodiac sign. Then we pan through a series of weddings. She gets married like 3 times, and they just basically, it's like the same scene, but they keep changing out who the groom is, and her friends are like, this is ridiculous. Or like, how many of these have we been to? So she's just like getting married over and over and over again. Then all 3 marriages also end in divorce. And like, girl, at that point, it's a you problem, okay? Then we see the Zodiac Council debating again. What is her problem? Then her friends stage intervention. They're like, hey, J-Lo, you don't know how to be alone. That's a problem. And she's like, well, you have this, like, she like calls out all her friends. She's like, you have this problem and you have this problem. And she's like, you would rather, argue with someone than be in a relationship with them. And you just bounce around from hookup to hookup and blah, blah, blah. And her friends were like, you know what, fine. We're not going to help you. Boom. She's back at the therapist. The therapist says, yeah, we can't do this anymore. You need to go to Love Addicts Anonymous. So she goes to Love Addicts Anonymous. It's like, is it so wrong to want to spend your life with somebody? Which, like, Curly Pop, that is not the issue that we were having with you here. Then she gets invited to the wedding of one of her exes, I think, or one of her friends that she cut off. And then she has a dream where she goes back to her old neighborhood and is like, oh my God, the problem is that I didn't love my younger self. So I need to learn to love myself before I can love someone else. I have so many thoughts, guys. Then after that, she's like healed her inner child. She's like, you know what? I am going to go to the wedding and it's beautiful. Blah, 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 blah. Then she goes to the wedding. Dream finishes. And then she has so back to the earlier dream about the heart in the factory. All the flowers that were dead earlier are now alive, and the heart is pumping and working beautifully and wonderfully and fantastically. And she's reunited with her friends and her therapist, and she dances in the rain alone and has a great time in the end. Thank you, okay? If that sounded confusing to you, I'm sorry. I said that in the clearest and most concise and most like the best possible way I could have. But again, the plot of this movie doesn't make any sense. The plot does not exist. It's just a bunch of music videos for songs loosely tied together. So, going back to the beginning. She's on the motorcycle with this guy talking about heartbreak, basically. And they get into this big crash. And, like, don't let someone take you for a motorcycle ride in the sand. With no helmet, no gear of any sort, at top speed. And then be surprised that you will crash. I also think that's a very interesting metaphor for heartbreak, and I'm still not sure at this moment whether the guy died and that's why her heart was broken, or whether that was just a metaphor for like the relationship exploding. Then we get into the factory, and like, I know in musical, in like media in general, but in musicals specifically, you need to have a suspension of belief. So when they break into song and dance, you're not like, well, this wouldn't happen in real life, because like, obviously, right? But to me, it still has to be organic, and the dancing in the factory scene just like, it was like they were dancing to do things to correct the issue with the heart, but it didn't make any sense because they weren't like, it didn't connect well. And so I just had a little like issue with that. Unfortunately, however, because I didn't want to like any of the music, but the first song she sings, and also I don't know the names of any of these songs, okay? But the first song she sings in the first factory scene where the heart is dying, she uses a sample of her song where she goes, you know the song that's like, I'm still Jenny from the block, which is a banger, unfortunately. She kind of samples that. She does like change the beat and the tempo a little bit, but she goes, they see it's the same old Jenny, wanna block me. Paparazzi trying to make a move like they got me. Ask me how I did it. Now we at the top. Perfect timing. Don't be fooled by the rocks that I got. And she says in her original song, she goes, "Don't be fooled by the rocks that I got. I'm still Jenny from the block. Used to have a little. Now I have a lot." So I did like that. I did like that part. I don't know if again, don't know anything. Don't know if this song is like the first on the album and we went through the album in chronological order, or she like picked it to tell the story that she thought she was telling. But I think it was a good choice to start off the movie with that, because it did keep me a little like hooked. I'm like, all right, well, I like that one. And then I did say I would be willing to forgive the lack of suspension of belief if this was a dream sequence, but it doesn't really, I'm never really clear on what in this movie is a dream sequence and what is not. So then we like shifting forward a few scenes into the scene where she's in this abusive relationship. She's in this big glass house, which like obviously is like not real, right? Because she can see the other people also being abused. So I'm assuming it's meant to be like a metaphor, not even a dream, but like a metaphor for that relationship she's in as she's describing it to her therapist. And like obviously this is like, she's like, obviously she's portraying that she's in a toxic relationship. She's not trying to portray this as like a good thing. But me personally, and I just feel like this should be on record, if my man punched the wall, I would not then be providing first aid to his bruised hand. Okay? That's insane. And then also, I feel like this is not her intention. But one thing about J-Lo that I said earlier in my notes about this is that she acts like she knows someone's watching. And some people act, like I'm talking about like actors, okay? Act like they know they're acting. But J-Lo acts like someone who's like aware she's being watched. And she's trying to do things organically, but in this very polished way, if that makes sense. And so I know she's not trying to romanticize this toxic relationship, because it's very clear that's what she's trying to present it as. But she kind of does in this, because she's like trying to maintain this aesthetic while depicting being abused. And that's kind of towing the line of romanticizing it. Like, how am I meant to take her moment? She has this moment at the end where she's like locked herself in a room and she's crying and she's like, oh my God. Like basically you can kind of see this realization on her face that like she can't do this anymore. But like, how am I supposed to take that seriously when it's like all polished and she's in this beautiful sweater and she's J-Lo and like there's a R&B track playing in the background? I just feel like you're asking us, again, back to suspension of belief. You're just asking us to suspend our belief just a little bit too much. And you have to work with your audience. You gotta like, even if you're not meeting them halfway, you gotta meet them some of the way along. And then all of that said and done, we've witnessed the end of this abusive relationship. She's like, I'm not doing this anymore, and she leaves. All of that said and done, the Zodiacal Council, who we now meet, okay, they're in space, because of course they are. They're the zodiac signs, are like, oh, this is what happened when you date a Libra. And like, that's what we gathered from that whole scene of her man punching the wall and then abusing, and then they were like tied together by a rope. It was weird. But like, from the whole scene of depicting an abusive relationship, all we gathered is Libras are bad. Not like, maybe we should love ourselves or be alone for a little bit or pick better people, or get help. Nope, Libras are bad. That's what we discovered. Also, I take beef with that because my brother's a Libra and I love that guy. Also, okay, so the council here, okay? All faces I recognize, maybe not names I recognize, but I think one girl's named Kim Petra. She was there. Keke Palmer was there. Unfortunately, I have to forgive Keke Palmer because she was playing Scorpio. Post Malone was there playing Leo, I'm pretty sure. Jay Shetty was there. Don't know which one he played. Who else was there? Jane Fonda. And like, where was this casting call put out on Instagram? This is just the most random assortment of people. And I'm assuming like not everyone that she called agreed to be in it, because why would they? But like, these are the people that like, I have so many questions about like these people who I don't think interact with each other individually on a regular basis, as far as I'm aware. I don't know these people, but like as far as I'm aware, don't. all separately agreed to be in this movie. Now, I will say that I also forgive Post Malone for being in this, because he's the only person I think in this entire thing that plays their role perfectly. Like, he is committing to the bit in the best way possible. Like talking about how J-Lo always acts like someone who, like, she knows someone's watching her. Post Malone is acting like he knows this is ridiculous, so he's gonna play it up as much as possible while seeming like someone who's committed to being authentic. But he's authentically committing to the bit. You see what I'm saying? He's just a funny guy. I really like him. His PR people have been doing a really great job lately. Him and I said this a couple weeks ago on an episode, but Jacob Elordi's PR people also doing a great job. So after we meet the Zodiacal Council for the first time, they're like, "Oh God, what is she doing now? She's getting married several times over." Obviously, this is taking place over the span of a few years, but she's getting married. And then we also see, like, her going through the wedding. She's happy, blah, 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 blah. And as it slowly tapers off, she's like, all three of these men that are being shown in these scenes, she's now getting divorced. Like, they're going to couples counseling with her therapist from before. And she's like, yeah, this is not working. And all of them say, and then we see her leaving them officially, and all of them say some variation, like, "You're going to be back," or whatever. And she's like, "No, I won't." And I'm sorry, but I think that after 3 weddings, you should stop getting married. And I'm also sorry about this, but if you were the common denominator in 3 failed marriages, it might be you. Sorry, not sorry. And then her friends are like trying to, so they give her, like, they stage an intervention for her because she comes home with this guy, and they're like, their friends are like, "Can you leave the room? Like, we want to talk to her." And she's like, "No, you can stay." And they're like, "What is this guy? And like, how'd you meet him? What are the two of you doing? You are however years old, and you're hanging out with this young guy, and the guy's got a gun." And they're like, what is wrong with you?" And the guy's like, "You know what? I'm going to leave." And she's like, "No, don't leave." He's like, "No, I'm going to leave." So they have this intervention for her, and she's like I told you about earlier, she's like, "You would rather sleep, like, you sleep around with every single, you just go from hookup to hookup, and you would rather argue with people than date them, and blah, blah, blah." And like, she's like, is there something so wrong with wanting to spend your life with someone and be happy? And no, there's nothing wrong with wanting to spend your life with someone. There is something wrong with an inability to be alone, which was the point of the intervention. And then I don't like this because we never learn the friends' names, but if you look at, like, the closed captioning, it'll tell you, like, the lover, the cynic. So, like, all of her friends are, like, stereotypes or tropes. Not tropes. Stereotypes. I can't remember the word right now. Stereotypes, for lack of a better word, in love. So, like, you know, the cynic is the person who, like, doesn't believe love exists at all. I think at the wedding, the cynic gave a speech that was like, you know, getting married again, but he's hot and has a good credit score. So, you know, which is, like, fair. But also, and I thought it was very bold of her, again, in the movie, to be like, you go from hookup to hookup, and, like, how much difference is there in going from hookup to going from relationship to relationship? Like, that's a real high horse you're getting on there, J-Lo, because at the end of the day, it's the fear of commitment. And I think at least the hookup person is not, like, going into it going, I can't be the hookup person's not going into it thinking they're going to make a life out of this. Whereas you going from relationship to relationship, you're fully convinced every single time you're making your life here. And you're not. Again, you're the common denominator in 3 failed marriages. And then she's like, but then at the end she goes, "True strength is believing in love after you get knocked down time and time again." And I am begging people, take an English. Like, we should not have to break things down so plainly, so early on in the film. Like, I think it's a good point to be made, and I agree with it. And I don't know if we were meant to be rooting for her after this speech, because I wasn't, because, again, there's nothing wrong with wanting to spend your life with someone. There just is something wrong with a complete and utter ability to be alone. But yeah, true strength is believing in love after you get knocked down time and time again. I don't think we needed that to be spelled out for us. We haven't even made like a point. We're not even halfway through the movie. And then, so her therapist is like, yeah, I can't help you anymore. I'm going to send you to Love Addicts Anonymous. So she goes to Love Addicts Anonymous and talking about how, like, when your heart never goes to sleep, you know, she's like, oh, my heart never went to sleep. I guess I've always had a restless heart. And this is the first time in this movie that I think her singing a song actually made sense. It, like, I think being at a whatever anonymous, like, you know, like Alcoholics Anonymous or whatever, blah, blah, blah. Being in a meeting in that sort of sense, or like a therapeutic setting, it makes sense to suspend belief in your commiserating with these people who also have had this struggle with this thing with you. That makes sense to be like a touching singing moment. And everyone's singing, like, not everyone's singing. The rest of the attendees in the meeting are dancing. So, like, that's their way of contributing and, I guess, basically sharing their pain without vocally sharing it for the sake of the narrative. So I did like this. The TikTok I saw said they didn't get this song at all. But this is I agreed with this one. And this is also the first time I kind of agreed with the structure of the story, because I felt like this movie could have been told a lot better, just like in terms of how they cut things together. Like I said in the beginning, they cut the motorcycle scene kind of very harshly into this heart failing. And we don't realize the heart failing in the factory is like a dream sequence, which again, still not 100% sure it is. But if it is, it's never really made clear to us. And so I'm just confused because I'm like, wait, it's like Chekhov's gun. You know, like if you see a gun, basically, if you see a gun in a scene, the gun has to go off at some point later in time. And she was just showing us lots of guns in this movie. And 30% of them went off, you know? So. But I do think after the Love Addicts Anonymous meeting, she kind of like has like some clarity, and she's like, oh my God, I do need to love myself. Because then that's when she has that little dream sequence about like, she's like, oh yeah, I'm going through my old neighborhood and I meet the first guy I was ever in love with. And then there's this little girl behind, she's like, I feel like someone's watching me. And then there's this little girl and she's like, you left me and you didn't love me. And older J-Lo's like, oh my God, I'm so sorry I didn't protect it. And they hug and they cry. And it's like, you know, she's been searching for love in all these places because she felt like she needed it, but she never gave it to herself, and she should have done that. And so I did like the little message of like, you gotta love yourself first. And I saw this recently and I agree with it, is how that whole idea of you have to love someone before, like you have to love yourself before you can let someone love you, is kind of misconstrued, in the sense that it's kind of the idea of that, like, if you don't love yourself, you are willing to settle for people who don't love you properly or well, and not so much like, you gotta be in love with yourself to accept, like, that sort of idea. But again, it's a little spoon-feedy, like, it's a little bit spoon-fed to us. But I don't want to say that word again, but it's a little spoon-fed to us. But I agree with the message there, and I agree. I like that it wasn't like her friends telling her this knocked the sense into her. I still don't agree with how hostile she was when they had that intervention, but I agree that like she had to still do the work, even if it was subconsciously, to fix said problem. And then we see the Zodiacal Council another time or two, and I feel like that was just a through line that she like really wanted to include because she's a big like astrology girly. But it had no follow through. Going back to my Chekhov's gun, we saw the gun of the Zodiac Council, and it was like locked and loaded a few times, but it never really like went off appropriately. And we go back to the factory. The heart is fixed. The petals are blooming because she's loved herself, and that love helped those flowers grow. So now they can take these flower petals and feed the heart that helps her love. But she learned how to love even though the flower petals. I'm still confused on the circle here. But the heart is working. The Zodiacal Council, the council room itself gets lit up beautifully because now the heart is working. So back to my suspension of belief and issues with this movie. The Zodiacal Council seemed like they were part of reality. Obviously, she doesn't know they exist, but we keep they're like like it's like having like God in a movie, but also they're affected by this heart that she has in her factory dream where the heart was dying, but now she fed it so it's not dying anymore. So what part of this do they live in? Or is the heart in her dream just a visual mental representation of her actual heart? So in her dream the heart got lit up. So now her actual heart is lit up because she's learned how to love herself and thus won't look for love and safety and comfort in another person. So because she did that to herself personally, the Zodiacal Council is lit up. Also, is the Zodiacal Council just for her? Like, does everyone have their own, or do they oversee? Actually, I think I have a lot of thoughts about this and questions about these guys now that I didn't write down before. But I have questions. I'm not going to get them answered, so I'm going to wrap this up with she's going to her ex's wedding because he invited her, and that's when he invited her, and that's when she had to do the inner work to like be like, I don't need to love someone, I need to love myself first. So then she goes to the said wedding, and too many people were wearing white. She's going on her little expose that's like, it's kind of like a voiceover, but it's her talking to the therapist in reality of like, you know, all these good things she's learned. But like, J-Lo, just make a bunch of music videos. None of this makes sense. None of this was necessary. I honestly think this would have been more powerful if we had cut out all the middle bits and she just posted a bunch of like slightly long music videos on YouTube. We still would have gotten the message, and I think we would have understood they were all connected, but I didn't need to watch them back to back to back to get that. I genuinely think that made them less impactful. But I will end on a high note and a little bit of praise for J-Lo, because at the end it's like, oh, she meets her true love. And do you know who she picked to play said true love? None other than the Boston man himself, Ben Affleck. So I do think that having your actual man play your like true love, your one true love interest in your movie is a girl boss move. So unfortunately, I gotta give her props for that and the Jenny from the Block sample. I think sometimes it's okay not to reinvent the wheel. We don't have to make a movie out of our music videos. We can make, like, Eleanor told me about this. Who is it? The Lumineers and their, with the Ballad of Cleopatra. If it's a EP or an album or whatever it is. Basically, all the music videos were, like, I think posted separately. And then they just took, like, a little bit of information to connect. And so you can watch them all together. But even if you watch them separately, there's little things and Easter eggs and actors or characters, I guess, that run throughout all of them. So you can be like, oh, I see how this is connected. Or I see how we got from point A to point B. And then again, listening to the songs, you can be like, oh, here's a theme in this song that's touched on in this song. And here's a line in this song that's kind of like reiterated in this song. We don't need to reinvent the wheel and make a movie, J-Lo. You can just do that. As a matter of fact, I think you're someone who's earned the right to do the bare minimum because you have such a catalog and such a history behind you. But that's just me personally. Unfortunately, no one's hiring me to be their manager or creative director. I think they should. I think I would do a very good job. But until that happens, you can take my opinion with a grain of salt. We will be back next week. And by we, I mean definitely me and possibly Eleanor. If you have any suggestions, any comments, if anyone's watched this and liked it, maybe like a J-Lo fan, maybe I'd like to hear your perspective. Also, what did you think of the song? I didn't think the songs were good. There was one song in here that was like, she was like, this is me now, which was like assuming the title song of the movie album. And it was bad. It was not good. But I'm not a big J-Lo fan, so maybe that's just me personally, okay? But anyway, if you guys have any suggestions about what you'd like us to talk about next time, let me know. You can comment, you can DM us, interact with us. However you interact with things on whatever platform you're listening to this on. And check us out on Instagram and TikTok at Don't Quote Us on that. And we are over on Twitter at Don't Quote Us 27. I have a ball on all of those. I have been a little MIA the last couple of weeks, but I am getting better about it, so keep up to date that way. And I think that's everything. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening. Don't quote me on that. One day we'll have an outro, but it's not today.